Thanks so much for coming out, everybody. This is the 5th annual Willow Storytelling Festival, and I'm Megan Sukes. I grew up in North Carolina, and so for me growing up, just about any occasion was a reason to share a story. And so I was used to hearing everybody anywhere say, well, you know what happened to me one time? Or, well, a long time ago. And all of these stories that we shared talked about stories of making it through hard times, stories of why we did what we did, how we got where we are, what it means to make it through the world. But I was also a child of the 70s and 80s, and just about any occasion was a good reason to go to the movies. And the stories in the movies were very different. Star Wars, Back to the Future, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I like these stories, because in these stories, the hero was destined, the villains were vanquished, and there was a nice dance number before the credits rolled. And for me, I thought, yes, I'll take that life, not the life that I hear about from my family members and from my community members. Those ones, they're harder. The villains aren't so clear. Maybe the outcome's not so wonderful. But as I grew older, I found out that Hollywood endings are not the way real life works. And you can't just decide, I'm going to have the movie ending in my life. And in fact, in real life, things don't always turn out great. And at those moments, that's when the stories that I had heard from family members in my community, the stories that were a little harder, they came through and really helped me. And that's why we're here today. These aren't the stories that are the movies where everything is perfect. These are the stories from 4 women who have made a huge difference in our community, who've taken big risks, faced incredible challenges, and keep going no matter what. That's what Willow is all about, is honoring the legacies within our community, the value that women have brought, and the stories that they can share, because the work that we do to make a better community can't be done in one lifespan. We have to be able to pass it on. And how do we do that? You can't put that kind of thing in a note and just share it. You have to share the story, the lessons, the experience, and that's what we're going to do today. And here's the cool thing. You're going to make a profit off this. Not cash, but emotional, mental, wisdom-wise, because when you leave here today, you're going to have 4 unique perspectives on this community, from this community, and about this community that you'll be able to take back as you do your work and connect with your members of the community and make the world a better place in the way that only you can do. So thank you for joining us and helping make this happen. Applause to you. So to get started, I want to also thank the organizations and people who gave back to make this event possible, our sponsors. And our sponsors, thanks to the generous contributions of the Broadway Center for the Performing Arts, who made sure that we could have this gorgeous space, Ferguson Films, McGranahan Architects, Callie Holt Photography, Tree, who gave us this beautiful stage setting, the Lair family, and the dedicated work of the entire Willow board, who believe in this and want to share this with the community. So I'd like to begin today with a welcome from 2 women who have incredible stories of their own, Rosa Franklin and Song Shin. Rosa Franklin is the first Black woman elected to the Washington State Senate. She served the 29th Legislative District in the Tacoma area, and Rosa is also a registered nurse who retired after 42 years in healthcare. And Song Shin is the reason we're here today. It was her vision to celebrate the voices of women and girls and share life lessons across generations that led her to found Willow, the Women's Intergenerational Living Legacy Organization. Song and Rosa, could you come up and get us started?
Thank you, and good evening. Afternoon, not evening. You see what generations will do for you? When you reach my age, you begin to think, well, they introduce you as legendary. Am I a legend or not? On behalf I want to say, on behalf of Willow, I extend to each of you a warm welcome to our 5th Storytelling Festival. Of course, you know that storytelling has been with us for centuries and passed down from one generation to the next. That of history, humor, and culture. Through storytelling, we can connect with generations. We can learn about various cultures and background. And as you listen to each of our guests tell her story, giving us a peek into their journey on the way to their chosen destination, that you, of course, will find something to add to your toolbox that will inspire and encourage you to never give up, but leave a legacy to help generations to come. And again, I say to each of you on behalf of Willow, welcome.
Thank you, Rosa. She's our advisor as well, so we are so grateful. And thank you. It's so good to see you in person again this year. As you all know, WILLO is a nonprofit organization. We connect our community through storytelling. And I am so grateful to have you all here to celebrate this year's strong women leaders that we have with us, and learn their inspirational, personal life stories. 5 years of celebration, inspiration, and connection. We are so grateful. This year, I'm multifunctioning. I'm a clicker also. There. This year, we start our conversation at Asian Pacific Cultural Center, sharing Chinese salad, and discuss about what makes us happy. And everybody had a chance to write down what makes them happy on a sticker notes. And then afterwards, we kind of put together a word cloud. And then guess what they say? They said family, friends, connection. Those really make them happy. And I want to know how many of you actually had a chance to participate in our conversation. Thank you. Yeah, there are a few of you. Thank you. So we are going to have another one in 2019. The theme is Farm to Table. So stay tuned. It's going to be around March or April. So at that event, we also raised money because TCC Early Learning Center, they had an outdoor gathering project. So we raised the money and donated money for that project to support their young children and their families. And we have 31 storytellers, since it's our 5th year. So we are going to archive all women's stories. And that stories is going to be available through WILLO Tacoma YouTube right before Thanksgiving. So stay tuned for that. Also, we want to make sure that our long-term goal is that translating all those women's stories into diverse languages. So in honor of Judy Fortier this year, we are archiving her video in 5 diverse languages. And you are going to experience a Spanish caption later today. Another good news. Now we have a new WILLO board for 2019 through 2021. So I want to introduce our WILLO board. WILLO board members, please stand up as I introduce you. Sunny Ko, she will be our president, and Yeah, she's been with us for 5 years. So she said, okay, I'm going to lead this wonderful organization. So she's a founder of Attorney Office of Sunny Co. And we have Mary Robinette. She was not able to attend this today. She's actually on her way. She's our secretary, and she's attorney with Washington State Attorney General's office. And then also she's a candidate for next Pierce County prosecutor. And then we have a Debbie Scores. Debbie, where are you? There you are. She's our treasurer, and she is with TAPCO Credit Union, and she's working as a controller. And then we have a board of directors, Anna Sierra, Barbie Pratt, Robin McConsky. She won't be here today with us. Sarah Irish, she has another function today. Anna, An Nyong. And then we have our advisors next 2 years, Rosa Franklin and Megan Sukis. And then again, I want to thank you to our donors and sponsors and all of you. You know, you've been with us through our journey, so thank you so much. And especially Megan Sukis, she really elevated our storytelling experience with art of craft. And so thank you so much for sharing your knowledge of craft and storytelling. You made us better storytellers. Thank you.
Thank you, Song. And I will say, the amazing thing is having an opportunity to work with the stories that are part of this community. And I think that's really, for me, as I've moved along, knowing how much stronger we get as a community when we know that value, that wisdom that we have. So thank you both, Rosa and Song, for getting us started and all that you've done to keep the stories going. So, we're about to sit in conversation with our storytellers, but we do want to take a minute to remember Judy Fortier. Judy was a proud South Tacoma native. She was the daughter of a union organizer and a public school music teacher. She was raised in Tacoma's Methodist community and learned early about giving back. And so many people knew Judy all around the community. She, for 30 years, worked in the Women's Rights Office for the city of Tacoma. And she received appointments from 4 different governors to the Judicial Conduct Commission, Governor's Affirmative Action Commission, and the Minority Women's Business Advisory Committee. The Washington State Supreme Court appointed Judy to the court's Gender and Justice Commission. Judy was a board member of many organizations, including the National Organization for Women. She was the now Tacoma president, the now Washington president, and she served 4 years on the National Board of NOW in Washington, D.C. Judy was a powerhouse, and she passed away earlier this year. And if you go online, you can see a lot that was written about Judy. So many people knew her, were touched by her. They called her a fighter. They called her a Spitfire. They called her a character, they called her a champion, they called her a friend. And 2 years ago, Judy was on the stage sharing her story. Was anybody here 2 years ago? Does anyone remember that story? She rocked it. She inspired me. She had so much energy and connected me to this community. And so what we want to do is revisit Judy's story from this stage 2 years ago so we can all remember and celebrate all that Judy did for the community.
You served on lots of city, county, state boards, commissions, and you've been a longtime member of the National Organization for Women. You served as the Tacoma president and the Washington State president of NOW, and you also served 4 years on the NOW National Board. You grew up here. You're the daughter of a union organizer and a public school music teacher. You've gone through so much in your career. What was your dream when you were a girl growing up here in Tacoma?
Well, that's really easy. Dreams, right? Actually, like the 2 stories you previously heard, I am the daughter of Marie. I am the granddaughter of Mavis and Violet, and I am I'm the great-granddaughter of 2 Elizabeths. My middle name happens to be Elizabeth. But I came from a time, I think, where we didn't know a lot about the women's movement. Most of the people who we admired were in our homes. But when I look back at that, I was a South Tacoma girl. You have to be a South Tacoma girl to know what it's like to grow up in Tacoma. I mean, we got beat up because we grew up in South Tacoma. Now, nobody knows that very much about South Tacoma girls, but I know. One of my friends, Elaine, is in here. She and I went to school together. We know what it was like. And there's something about being little and having to be just a little bit tough to make it even through elementary school. So let me tell you what my elementary school was like. Anyone know where Arlington Elementary School is? That's the area of town I grew up in. Okay, the girls, of course, I'm looking at Vivian over here. Vivian, I couldn't even wear pants. When we went to elementary school, you had to wear a dress or a skirt. No pants allowed. Not even on a Friday. No pants. The boys had the big field down below Arlington. They got to do team sports and everything, and us girls, we were up above, you know, doing like jacks and throw the ball or whatever. And so we grew up, you know, with Dick and Jane. I call that now Dick and Jane as victims, because Jane, if you ever heard this, if you look at a Dick and Jane book, right? Here's Jane. No hands. She never had any hands. You know? And Dick, of course, Dick got to do everything. You know, Dick was busy, he had a dog, he got to play games or whatever. And Jane. So that's how I grew up, South Tacoma. Then I had to go to Gray Junior High. That's a whole other story. We won't go there. We'll leave that to the teachers. And then Mount Tahoma. Let's put it this way, I was lucky never to be kicked out of school. My father threatened he'd send me to Reman Hall. I mean, all kind of things happened to me in junior high. And then off to high school, I went at Mount Tahoma. When I finally decided, there was no discussion in our family if you were going to college. There was none. My daddy never got to go to college. My mother went to WSU, and that was another thing. You aren't going anywhere but WSU. That's where we went. My sister went first, I went second, I'm a cougar. And, yeah, I'm a cougar! But, so I go off to WSU, and I was going to be a firefighter. Now, mind you, have any of you seen a 5-foot firefighter? No, so they kind of talked me out of it in school that, no, can't be a firefighter. Good. So I go through the catalog for WSU, and I find police. I go, yeah, I think I'll be a police officer. Well, it was women back there, police women. Okay, 1965, there was a show on TV called Honey West. Honey West was the bomb, I'm not kidding you. She was about 6 feet tall, gorgeous, drove a sports car, she was a detective. I said, I'm gonna be Honey West. That is what I'm going to be. So off to college I go to be Honey West. I'm gonna be a cop. My parents are like shaking their heads like, God. Yeah, she's gonna be a cop, okay. So at least she's going to college. So off to college I go. So I walk all proudly and everything into the police science school and start looking around. And this is where we go to the other stories here, right? Are there any women around here? Are there 6 of us? 6 women in the whole entire police science school. This was before criminal justice. It was police. And this is how it started. The counselors in the school started saying, well, Judy, it's really nice that you want to be a police officer, a policeman. Really nice you want to be a policeman, but, you know, they don't really hire women. So are you sure you want to be in this school? Well, you know, I just dug my feet in like, heck yeah, I can be a police. I'm going to be Honey West, so it doesn't matter.
Judy Fortier. Judy was an inspiration, and I have to say, I think about Song's vision for Willow when she started at 5 years, and she saw and recognized, as did many of the women who came together, the value of the legacies, the kind of lives that we have right here in our community, and the value that we all get for ourselves and passing on to generations to share them. And so all we needed was a way to connect and to listen, and I'm so glad that you guys are here. We could do that. And I'm even more excited about our show today and our 4 storytellers, because this is how we keep it going. I'd like to invite our 4 storytellers for today to come to the stage. Please help me welcome Ramona Bennett, Bev Grant, Tomiko Naimura, and Erin Gwinnett. Thanks so much for joining us today, and we really are hoping that this feels like a living room. If we had a big enough living room, we would have had you all over, but we just couldn't get one for the whole site. So this is like a living room today, and a chance to share in a conversation that so few of us get a chance to do. And Ramona, you're going to start us off today with your story. You served as the chair of the Puyallup tribe, founded the Rainbow Youth and Family Services. You have an MA in education from University of Puget Sound, and you were also awarded an honorary doctorate from UPS in 2000. And in 2003, the Native Action Network gave you an Enduring Spirit Award. But on top of that, you're a mother, a foster mother, a grandmother, a great-grandmother, and a great-great-grandmother? And you've been written about extensively. For more than 50 years, you've been on the front lines of justice and family rights and Indian concerns, and you're still going hard. You're still fighting. For you, as you're with us today and you're still working at it, what events, what experiences have meaning for you?
Boy, is that a big question. It's all encompassing. Well, I think I'd like to just get started. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to tell this story. A beat suit, are you live streaming someplace? A beat suit, where'd she go? Well, I probably will never get a chance to tell this story again, so I want to make sure it's recorded. I grew up in Seattle mostly, and as a young adult, a friend that I had met at the telephone company, Ma Bell, when I was a phone operator, Jeannie Thomas, had gotten involved with the American Indian Women's Service League and the Seattle Indian Center and the Seattle All-American Indian Dancers. And so Jeannie grabbed me and dragged me in, mostly because she knew my mom went to boarding school, so she knew I could sew. And this was a topic that had never come up, but she knew I could, and I could. And she was making regalia for inner city Indian kids that didn't have their Indian dance clothes. And so that's how she first involved me doing, there's a beat suit. She had gotten involved, and she got me involved, and she had me beating up outfits and sewing outfits. And we used to go to Goodwill and buy wool coats and wool skirts, and we'd make cowls and breeches and dresses. And you know, on a really tight budget, we could make a kid look really good. And so we really got into helping these kids, you know, fit in and belong. And that's important. It's really important for Indian kids. That's back during Crystal Barbies, where everybody wanted to be cute and blonde. And we made our kids look really beautiful and it helped them feel real. And so through that, through the Indian Center, Pearl Warren kind of glommed onto me, and she found out that I could type, and she found out that I could write, and she told me I was going to be doing presentations. And I said, well, I can't talk in front of people. And she said, when you have something to say, you'll be able to talk. And so she had me write letters, which is the early stages of grants. She had me write letters doing requests and then go out and talk to these different committees and boards and congregations to get help for the Indian Center. And the Indian Center was like home base for all of these Indians through relocation programs. There were lots of Indians in Seattle and not many opportunities. And so through that, we started working on getting Fort Lawton. And it was surplus land, and we wanted it for the Duwamish Indians so they would have a land base. And that was 3 invasions that we did, and each one could be a whole book. But we did these invasions. We established a camp. We set up, my house was the headquarters, and it was exciting, and it was during Alcatraz, and so we had back and forth communication with these activists that were home based out of California. Well, one day my mom needed a ride to a tribal meeting, and she just had one best friend, Alice Buber, who was from the Cross family, and she needed a ride, and so I just took the day and I brought her. Now, in my working life, I was a Teamster, and that meant I made better money than most men. And I had a little brick house in northeast Seattle with hardwood floors, and it really did have a white picket fence and a fireplace. And I was driving a new Cougar car, and I drove her to Tacoma, and I was just passively watching all of this. Well, there had been a recall, and they'd kicked the whole consul out. That's how mean my tribe is. They'd kicked the whole consul out. And one of the elders, Hattie Cross, nominated me to be a consul person. And somebody else said, well, she's not even a member. Hattie said, what does she have to do to be a member? Because my mom was there and she was a member. And they said, well, she was born more than 20 miles from the reservation, so she'd have to be adopted. Well, Hattie said, what does she have to do to be adopted? And they said, well, she needs a permanent address on the reservation. And Hattie says, Ramona, where are you going to be buried? And we were in a church basement, which is where all good movements began. Everybody, y'all know that. And I just pointed across the driveway, and I said, right over there. And Hattie says, well, that's the only permanent address any of us ever have. So she made a motion that I be adopted. Her daughter Tony did a second. I was voted in. Then Hattie said, I make a motion. I nominate Ramona Bennett for a consul position. Tony did a second on that. And I was on the ballot. Now, I've been a Puyallup Indian for less than 5 minutes, and now I'm on the ballot. So they had an election, and I was voted in. Now, there goes my Teamster life. There goes my little brick house. There goes my whole world as I had established it. Now, I am a consul person for a tribe. And everything we were fighting for in Seattle, we don't have. We don't got it. With Bernie Whitebear, I had written the plan for Fort Lawton. And we had everything. We had a school, we had a clinic, we had a treatment program, we had job training, we had a culture center. We had big plans. And now I'm in Tacoma, and I'm representing a tribe that has no rights that are recognized, no land, no money, no services. Our tribe had zero, absolutely nothing. And except our people had continuously held themselves together. And my fictive auntie, Alice Buber, had maintained minutes continuously through all of these years. Our tribe had 23,000 acres that were federally protected reservation land. In 1912, there was a Cushman Congressional Act that allowed us to sell our land. We did not want to sell our land. My most immediate family was murdered for the titles to the property. This tribe was slaughtered and displaced, and we were literally homeless on our own reservation. And so now, here I am. And we've got to get moving. And from Seattle, I knew Urban League, because the Seattle Indian Center and Urban League had coalesced, had helped each other out, stepped up, stood together, lobbied together, Vietnam War peace strikes, the Southern Christian Conference, Puyallup even had a delegation at the Poor People's Campaign. And, you know, the tribe was not dormant. We were neglected. We had had the regional hospital, and that was Alaska, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Montana. It was a big regional hospital, but it was shut down, and that the title was being conveyed to the state. It was a program called Cascadia, which was terrible. It was an awful program. They were using our Indian hospital for a boogeyman and a torture chamber, and they were storing children. It was a bad thing. The Presbyterians owned our cemetery, and that also was part of the original agency tract. So our cemetery was right next to our hospital, which had been converted into this very bad program. The state Fisheries and Game Department controlled our river, and our fishermen had not had a recognized open opportunity to fish for 90 years. 90 years. I mean, we have a lifespan, a median lifespan of 45 to 47 years. And so that was, nobody could even remember when it was okay to fish without being arrested. And we had always had vigilantes. Our fishermen had continued fishing, but they would be dragged off the river, gassed, clubbed, their nets cut up, if they had a little outboard motor, it would be dropped in the salt water, and then they would be arrested and treated like thieves in front of their children. And so this is what I came into. And to get started, I went to Urban League. And I just went walking through the door, and Tom Dixon is actually the first person I met. He's the first person that talked with me. And I told him, I've been elected to Puyallup Tribal Council, and I'm going to establish our tribe. Not reestablish, because we had never had an office. The Bureau sold off our allotments, folded up their carpetbags, and they left. Indian Health, when they transferred the title over to the state, began transferring the title, they folded up and left. And so we were just there, homeless. And I told him, I'm going to do this, but I don't have a desk, I don't have a typewriter, I don't have a phone, I don't have a copy machine. I have nothing. And he said, well, there's your desk, there's your phone, there's your copy machine, that's your secretary, and I'll get you a typewriter. And so Urban League was my home base, establishing the tribe. And they did. They took our messages, they copied our court papers. I did the press work and the beginning grants for all of the services right there out of the Urban League office. They were nothing but kind and helpful. But you know, I thought they'd been around for 15 years like Seattle. I had no idea. They had just opened their door. And I was the first one to walk through. And I wasn't black. But, you know, up in Seattle, you know, we coalesced. And so just right from the get, I guess our tribe was the first Urban League project. And I mean, it was good. We succeeded. We prevailed. Our armed camp in 1970 did what people had been trying to do for a long, long time. We were able to assert our, I must be out of time. What time is it?
You're doing okay.
Well, no, I'm
You
only.
probably got 5-10 minutes. You're okay.
Are you sure?
I am.
'Cause-
I am.
'cause
That's
I
my
don't
job.
want to run over into these guys' time. I mean, I think that's a very important piece of history for Tacoma, that Urban League really rescued us and gave us a home base. And later on, Joy Hardiman and Maxine Mims came to me, and they said, we want to establish a Tacoma campus for the Evergreen State College, and we don't have space. And I had built 2 buildings using CETA funds. I found out later that we were the only ones that nationally through the CETA program that build anything. But I had it in my mind that the building materials could be training supplies, and the journeymen could be teachers, and our Indian people who were just chronically unemployed could be the trainees, and we could get job skills and buildings, and we did. And so we had a building that had a courtroom, and it had a conference room, and so that was the Tacoma campus of Evergreen's first classrooms. Yay! So we've been working back and forth together. Now we need to keep working back and forth together. Our tribe right now is involved in I-940, which is referred to as de-escalation. But we're involved because TPD murdered one of our girls. And so we're very invested in setting some standards of conduct for the police all over the country. And we're involved in 1631, which is climate change. And I don't know if you're aware of climate change. I'm not going to bother trying to tell you if you don't know yet. You probably need to just stay under your rock. Until you're flooded out. But the Indians have an interest in 1631. Part of the fines and fees will go to tribes, and when we have wildfires in eastern Washington, which we're going to have more and more of, the very last relief comes to the tribes. And here in western Washington, several of the tribes have had to move their housing and their schools and their administrations to higher ground because they're already flooding out. And so those 2 issues, and those of you that know me personally know I want to get rid of 11,000 seals that are tearing up the salmon. And all of our hatcheries have only been raising seal food, no progress forward. And so the seals and sea lions need their populations greatly reduced. And for the animal rights people who are offended by me saying that, in 5 years it'll be 22,000 seals. They're very rapidly, God, I don't even know what to call it. You're going to be walking on seals if we don't get rid of some of them. And I was talking to some Indians about this, and one of the girls said she was fishing, and a seal actually came in her boat and attacked her, wanting to fight her for the few fish that she had caught. So we really have a problem with that. And there are a bunch of other issues, but I would say those are probably the main three. Trump isn't our problem. I mean, he is our problem, but he's not our problem. So that's what we're working on today, and we're going to continue working with coalitions. So, yay.
Thank you, Ramona. You can drop the mic on that one. Thank you. We turn, and so much of our storytellers today have deep roots and connections in Tacoma. And Bev Grant, you are, in many ways, Tacoma royalty. You were the first African-American daffodil princess. Representing Stadium High School in 1969. And your father was a major leader in Tacoma. He helped so many people. And you went on to practice law in California and Washington and served as a Pierce County Superior Court judge from 2003 to 2013. And after you retired, you then went on to open up your own law practice in 2014. And you're also the mother of 2 grown children. What brought you to Tacoma in the first place, Bev?
I wanted to see the World's Fair. My father was an officer, and we lived over in Broadmoor in Fort Lewis, and I was the oldest of 5, and I said, Dad, I want to see what this World's Fair is about. So the closest military base was Fort Lewis, and that's how we got here. And when we got here, I've heard these stories from my father. He was a later, he worked at the anti-poverty program as an executive director, and then later was appointed by 5 governors, 2 Rs and 3 Ds on the state parole board. But he told me of stories where he tried to live, set up a family home in, first it was Parkland, and he was discriminated against there because of his skin color. And then in Fircrest, where he had a captain friend who was willing to sell him his house. And my father said, well, George, I don't know if you want to move your family here because some of the neighbors might not like having, might not like having blacks in our neighborhood. And my father was rather an optimist. I don't know why. He was born in Texas. He should have known better. But he said, well, let's just have a neighborhood meeting, and I'm sure I can persuade them that we're just like normal people and should be allowed to live in Fircrest. Well, the neighbor bought in a sawed-off shotgun, and so Dad said he got the message rather fast, and we didn't move there. So in the early 60s, the areas where African Americans could only find homes was in the Hilltop area. And so that's where we lived. I attended McCarver Junior, I attended military school. And then when we moved to Hilltop, I was at McCarver for a couple of months and became Miss Magnificent at McCarver. And so I got beat up a lot at McCarver. There was a gang there, women's gang, where I was forced to do homework for one of the participants, And I did it for a good year, and then finally I spoke up to Ruby Harris and some others and told them what was going on. And it's kind of interesting. 50 plus years later, I'm at a Bible study at Charles Weatherby, Chana Weatherby's house. And I was telling this story how I went to McCarver and used to get beat up by this one participant. And one of the members called out her name. She beat me up too. So I learned a lot from that experience. One, I learned how to fight back a little bit. And two, I learned that the equipment and schools, it wasn't the desire of the teachers, because I'm one to believe that we should be paying and supporting our teachers much more than what we ever have. But the books and the equipment were so antiquated. Military schools are usually far advanced than civilian schools, but this one, there was such a large disparity that I literally began to tutor other kids there. And so I left McCarver and I ended up at Stadium. And that too was an experience. I graduated, I think, it's either 28 or 26 out of 400 and something students. But that still wasn't enough, because the counselor there, when we got ready to decide, one, whether you're going to college, that was never a point of discussion, because we all knew we were going to college. But what was interesting was the college recruiter who was our counselor at Stadium. Even though I was in the top 1% of my class, it still wasn't good enough, because she told me that, she said, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, I've always wanted to either be a doctor or a lawyer. And she said, well, your people can't do that. And I said, why can't I do that? She said, well, you can be a teacher. And I said, well, I like teachers, that's fine, but I want to be a doctor or a lawyer. And she said, no, you can't do that. So I remember going back to my parents and telling them, in our family, there wasn't any words like I can't. And I said, I was told today that I can't be a lawyer or a doctor because I'm black. And so that resonated with me later in life, and it was really easy which one I wanted to do. One, they said I was always arguing or fighting with somebody. And two, I just didn't like anybody else's blood other than my own, so I couldn't even be a nurse in Rosa. It was too painful just even taking off a Band-Aid. I spent 2 hours trying to do that. So that decided my fate. I wanted to be a lawyer.
What did you learn from your father? Your father had such a strong role in Hilltop and giving back to the community. What did you learn from him about what it meant to give back?
I learned a lot of things. When you're in the Army setting, you're sort of like in a utopia. You don't realize really what was going on the outside. And so during that time when there were riots and a lot of upheaval, I had a hard time initially grasping what was going on, because I thought everyone was being treated, at least with the basic essentials, like we got on base, especially the officers. I mean, if you wanted to move, somebody came and packed you up. You had a lot of resources. I soon learned, once we lived in Hilltop, that wasn't true. And my father was on the anti-poverty program. I think it was MDC or something. But I remember him hiring Harold Moss and Tom Ditson and some other people. But one of the things Tacoma is a very cohesive group. And if you come from the outside, no matter how educated you are, no matter how talented you are, you have a battle to confront, because people like their own inside people. And it's to the detriment a lot, I think, of Tacoma. So Dad was able to overcome a lot of obstacles. He hired Jack Tanner to be his lawyer when we couldn't live in Parkland and Furcrest. And then many, many years later, I ended up being Tanner's law clerk. And that was very educational in and of itself. But I've always been taught that you can't lay dormant. You have to fight for what you believe in, and you have to respect those who have come before you, who have paved the way, and never ever forget from whence you've come, because you know what? You may have to go back the same way. I found that there was a lot of things that could be done here, and I was always interested in pursuing different things. So what that meant was I had to be very selective in the friends that I chose. I surrounded myself with people who were doers, people who said, I can do or I will do, and did it. People who would not downplay a suggestion if you wanted to try something new. People who were energetic and innovative and wanted to make a contribution of some sort. So if you were the couch potato and you were the type that were always down in who was this and who was that and had nothing good to say or positive to say, I dumped you. I wasn't around you. I found that you would bring me down. If I stayed with you, I would end up adopting your principles. So to this day, I've always encouraged others, it's not the quantity of the friends that you have. It's the quality of those few friends that you share that can make all the difference. And that's what I did.
You talk about you may have to come back, and you are back in Tacoma after having had a career and a life also in LA. And in LA, you tried some very big cases with very high-profile clients. What did you learn from doing that?
I was very fortunate. The same thing in Tacoma. When I practiced for about 5 or 6 years in Tacoma, I was one of 3 women who had their own practices in Tacoma. And all of us had different stories to tell because we were totally discouraged about having our own practices. I had opportunities to work for the 2 largest law firms here in Tacoma, and I decided I wanted to have my own. And so I went and applied at 3 banks. And 2 of those banks gave me, I was working for a law firm, making 18 grand a year, and but I was bringing in $500,000 a year. And so I finally woke up and said, you know, there's something wrong with this equation. If I can bring in $500,000 for them and only get 18,000, maybe I could bring in $500,000 and keep some of that. And so I had good credit, and I went out and sought the help of some bank officers, and was granted 2 loans of $30,000 each. And I'll tell you, I had never seen $30,000. So I did like any person of my age would do. I partied with that money. I was a skier, so I went to all the ski resorts I wanted to go to. I bought art and sculpture, and I had a great time. And then I suddenly woke up and thought, Bev, you're going to have to pay this back, you know. And so I had my own practice, and I forgot about, you know, taxes. And so I won a very significant case, both in California. I was going to work part-time, and I had 2 children that I had stayed at home 4 years. But I had what I now recognize to be a virtual office here in Tacoma. And most people never knew I left because I was here. It was just a plane ride. I was here once a month, and my phones had local numbers that ring downtown LA. And when I moved back, I did the flip-flop. And so after I stayed at home, and I had a case up in Washington. I had specialized in sexual harassment at the time. And I had a case, and I wrote a letter between the breastfeeding of my daughter. And it was a 13-page letter, but I didn't have a fax machine. And so my husband at the time was a municipal bond attorney, and so he had plenty of fax machines downtown. They sent the letter off. The first counter came back at $2.50. And he says, wait a minute, how much time have you spent on this letter? I said, well, between changing the diapers and breastfeeding, I think maybe 13 hours off and on. He says, your first offer is $250, are you gonna take it? I said, hell no, I'm not gonna take that. And so we ended up selling for almost $500,000. It took me 30 hours of work, which included 2 physical trips from Tacoma to LA round trip. And so my husband said, well, maybe you do want to go back into private practice. And so I did. I said, well, I'll work part-time. First couple of cases, I represented a wardrobe costumer. We sued Fred Savage on the Wonder Years for sexual harassment. They had roughly 6 lawyers, 2 from New York, the prestigious Paul Hastings law firm and a couple others, and me. And they filed the equivalent of 13 motions to dismiss. I won all of the 13 except one because I sued Dan Lauria and couldn't find him. He was hiding doing a movie called The Twister. And I wasn't a movie fan, so I didn't know he was doing that. And then the second case, I sued Will Smith on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I represented Janet Hubert Whitten, who played Aunt Viv, and that's a story in itself. But Will was real decent about it. We had to send out, at the time, my husband and I had 30 employees, and we had to send out a memo, do not ask Will Smith for his autograph. And my kids will tell you that to this day, they remember that because our nanny would not bring him to the office, and they were very upset about that. Because they wanted Will's autograph. And then I sued the CEO of Xerox, and that brought me all related to sexual harassment incidences. And so when I flip-flopped and came back here, I had always had an interest in doing judgeship work. And eventually the opportunity, they had been asking me if I had an interest in my late 20s, and so finally I decided in my mid-50s, well, you know, maybe you better take it or you may not have another opportunity. And so you make choices, and sometimes those choices are great and sometimes they aren't. But one of the things I discovered was 2 things. One day, for those who are young or those who still believe they're young, or those who still want to be young, one day you will come across an obstacle and you will not know how to deal with that obstacle. And so for me, there was a mother who came. She was telling all the major networks that I represented her. I had no idea what her case was about because she hadn't called me, but the networks were calling me. And so I just kind of fronted them off. And I said, Lord, please have this lady call me. I don't even know what her case is about. And her case was in defense of her son who had been expelled from a local school. And we were able to take care of that situation. She couldn't afford to pay me. And so I told her to bring in her children. She had 7 kids. And I said, I want you to bring in all your kids into my office on Saturday. And I told the kids, you know, your mother couldn't pay me, but you are going to pay me back. And they ranged from 5 on up to 14, and the oldest one was like 16, and said, we don't have any money, we don't have any jobs, how are we going to pay you back? And I said, what's your name? So I went through each one of them, had them announce their name and their age and what they wanted to be when they would grow up. And I said, one day you're going to be that fireman, and you're going to be that veterinarian, and you're going to be that basketball player. Each of you will be in a position to help someone else like I was able to help your mother today. She had no money, and maybe they won't have any money, and maybe they won't even look like you. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you will be in a position to extend a helping hand. And I want you to make a promise to me today that when that time comes, you will remember your promise to me that you will give and help someone else like I help your mother today. So I asked them, can you do that for me? And they said, all of them said yes. And I said, that will be my payment. Just remember that you are in a powerful position to help others. And don't forget to do that. So that was the story.
Thank you so much, Bev. And I think maybe you could probably do it with the entire audience, and we'd all repay you as well right now. We're gonna all do our best. Thank you so much, Bev. We'll keep moving as we go through our stories and all of these different perspectives of all the ways that we can give back. And we turn now to Tomiko Naimura. Tomiko, you're a third-generation Japanese American, second-generation Filipina American, and you're also the mother of two. You've gotten academic training in literature and American ethnic studies, and now you write as a freelancer, essays, journalism, public historian as well. And for the past 2 years, you organized the local Day of Remembrance marking the anniversary of the authorization of Japanese American internment in 1942. And as part of that, you led a walking tour of Tacoma's Japantown. You moved here in 2004, but it was 10 years before you even knew there was a Japantown. How did you find out about it?
Okay. I'm just laughing at this little girl who's worrying up there. um, that's me inside. So let's see. It's 2 years. So it's 2014, October actually, and I'm walking up to the corner of Pacific and 17th. It was behind Elemental Pizza, and there's this memorial, and it's a ceremony to dedicate a memorial for the Japanese language school. Which was part of Tacoma. And I had done some research the night before and found out, much to my surprise, that we had a Japantown in Tacoma. It had been 10 years that I'd lived here before I knew that we had anything like this. And so I'm at this ceremony, and I don't know anybody. And I'm walking around, I'm looking around all these people, and before I know it, 200, 300 people start to gather, and a lot of them are Japanese American. And I'm looking at everybody going, where did all these Japanese American people come from? Was everybody hanging out without me? And I think, wow, there was something here, there was a story. And so I looked, when I got the chance then to do some research about Japantown, I took it. My friend Justin, who's here, invited me to look at to write for History Link, which is the Washington State Encyclopedia. And I wanted to do some research about Tacoma's Japantown. And what I found was so stunning to me. Not only did we had barbers, we had loggers, we had unions for the barbers, we had photo shops, we had sweet shops, we had close to 180 businesses owned by Japanese Americans before the war. That number alone, right, was so stunning to me. And so I was filled with all of this exciting knowledge, and Tony Gomez from the Broadway Center invited me and my friend Michael Sullivan, who is a local historian, to do a walking tour of Tacoma's Japantown. Michael's done walking tours before, and I'd never done one before at all. So we started out down at the Whitney, which is the art center now for Tacoma, and we think, it's February, it's cold. If we have 25 people show up, that'll be great. 90 people show up to find out about this history. There are people who had lived in the neighborhood in that former Japantown and never knew. We have some Japanese Americans who grew up in the area, but didn't really know the extent of that Japantown. And so we think, great, 90 people, we'll yell, we'll do our best. And at the end of the tour, we're standing right across the street, actually, from the Pantages, where the tour ends. And Michael turns to me and he says, we should do a Day of Remembrance for Tacoma's Japanese Americans. We should go to Union Station on the days that they left. It was May 17th and 18th, 1942, and we should stand where they stood and feel the impact of that moment. And fresh off the tour, I said, that is a great idea. And a couple of weeks go by, and I'm browsing on my computer, and I see that there's a grant to apply for it with a deadline. And I think this is the perfect thing for a Day of Remembrance grant. It's meant to bring people together. It's all about grassroots. It's about volunteers. And this is the great opportunity to do a Day of Remembrance. The problem was the grant deadline was about 24 hours away. So I think, okay, well, all right, there are doubts, right? There's time, surely, right? May is, about 8 weeks away. This could be a city event. Do we have time? That's one thing. Do I have time is another thing. I have two wonderful, beautiful school-age girls who I want to be there for and parent. I have a fantastic partner. I'm a freelance writer, so I'm usually juggling multiple projects at once. There's time. And with all that, there's energy, right? Do I have the energy to do this in this much time? There are things like, well, money. Not that I want to be paid for this. I didn't think I would be getting paid for it. But money, like, we need to rent space. We would need to find, publicity. We would need to find speakers or performers. This could be hundreds, if not thousands, of dollars. I had no idea if I could find enough of that. And then there were things like ethics, like, is this really my story that I should be retelling or honoring? I am Japanese American. I have lived in Tacoma. At that point, I'd lived there for about 10 years, 14 years, and I thought, well, okay, my family was sent to Tule Lake, California during World War II. They actually might have brushed up against the Tacoma Japanese Americans who were also sent to Tule Lake. And I think, well, I don't know if this is really my story. I'm not historically from Tacoma. And I did some research and I thought, oh, they did have one day of remembrance, but it was back in 1990 something, 98, and they've never had one since. They had never had one before. So is this my story that I should be working on and honoring? And so 10 minutes go by. And I start to think, and I start to type. I'm a writer, and you know what? I will just type. I'll draft this. I'll just see what the day could look like. I'll just make this up, just shape it for the day. I don't have to send it in, right? I'll just type. And as I'm typing, I am thinking of several women who have made an impact on me. The first one is my mother, who was always about helping people wherever there was a need. She took people in. If there was someone who needed something on the street, she would give it to them. She was all about giving, and she, I think, has always encouraged me to tell these stories and to step in where I thought there was a need. The second woman was actually a therapist that I worked with. She was Japanese American and third generation like me. And I was working with her on the Japanese American Citizens League in Berkeley after I'd graduated from college. So I had done this honors thesis for my English degree, and it was all about, well, third generation Japanese American women. And I was proud of this work. I thought, this is about silence, and it's about memory, and it's about the camp experience. It's all about these things that people, I believe, should know and learn about. And I was telling this therapist about the thesis, and she said, oh, I would love to see a copy. Could you send it to me? And so I brought her a copy. And we met again a month later, and I said, so what did you think of that? And she said, well, it was really well written. You did a good job. But you talked a lot about the role of the individual in healing. And these are important experiences. These are important issues that you are raising. She said, but I wonder about the role of the community in healing. What is the role of the community in healing? And she said, I have experienced some of the most important healing in community. And I wondered where that was in your work. So that gave me some pause. And I thought about that and have thought about it off and on for years. The third woman who I was thinking as I was typing this grant, which was due in less than 24 hours, was one of my aunties. She was one of my dad's younger sisters, so she was also sent to Tule Lake. And when I graduated high school, she took me aside. I don't think she wanted anybody else to know what she was giving me. So she took me aside into this back room, and she pulls out this envelope that has a card and a check in it. And I pulled it out, and I looked at the card, and I looked at the check, and it was a very generous check. I was so moved, and I looked at her, and I said, "Thank you." And she just looked back at me and said, "I've been saving." And later I would come to know that that was an act of what in Japanese is called okage-sama de, which means thanks to you, I am well. Thanks to you, I am well. And so I'm looking at the grant application, and I hit send. Who knows, right? I might get it, I might not get it. And I start to call Michael, whose name I put on the application, and said, what about that day of remembrance that you said? And he said, maybe we can make this work. And he started to call in favors. I started to talk to people. And though we didn't get the grant, we were still able to hold that first day of remembrance 2 years ago. But thank you. But I want to fast forward just a little to this year's Day of Remembrance, because that is the scene that holds the moment of what I want to really share with you today. At the second Day of Remembrance, we were able to hold it at the Washington State History Museum. There's a huge open rotunda in the lobby. There are balconies along that rotunda. And we had several hundred people, I think, throughout the day show up to be there. There was a moment during that whole day where we had taiko players who were playing. They were also playing at that memorial dedication ceremony that I'd been at a few years ago. But they were there. Wendy Hamai, who is the board president, was there and playing, but also speaking to us about the joy that comes from playing taiko and the joy that comes from having the ancestors and the power of resilience and what it is for a community to come back from hardship and adversity during the war. And above us, right, there was a display of 1,000 cranes that had been folded by Japanese Americans around Washington State. Wendy was talking to us, and she is the one who keeps telling me, Tamiko, we're still here. We're still here. We're still the one, Japantown disappeared, but we're still here. So there's this group, right, of taiko players playing. There are little kids in their kimonos down at the front, and they're dancing around. In the balconies, people have pulled their chairs up close to see the taiko performance. There's a grand staircase. People have lined that staircase and filled that staircase. And taiko playing, if you've ever experienced it, is really loud, right? You can feel it right here in your chest as you're playing it. And this particular moment was when I understood about the power of giving back to a community. It's not necessarily about duty or obligation. Those are actually very strange and somber words in American culture. This was about the joy of knowing that you are being carried by a community. And the joy of giving back is life-giving. Thank you.
I have a couple of little, Bev, the reason that I could type those press statements, court briefs, and grants and do the budgets for the contracts is because my guidance counselor told me I wasn't college material, so I better take bookkeeping and typing. Yay! Got to use it. And my friend Nobi Takahashi and I were walking across the fairgrounds, and I told her we're matrilineal societies. When the silvers come up the river, all of the boys, the men who are from our tribe, married out, and they would come back to help harvest and put up the silvers, and we'd have pony races and bone games and foot races and weddings and all kinds of giveaways and memorials. And then we invited a few white people, and they come, and now we pay to get in. It's called the Puyallup Fair. and Nobi Takahashi. Now see, in an earlier discussion, you know, I said I thought my family were the only Indians because John Wayne movies, they were always killing all of the Indians, and we didn't know no other Indians. And so Nobi said in the internment camp, the only movies they were allowed to watch was John Wayne killing Japs. And so we'd had that conversation earlier. Nobi pointed at a barn out there on the Puyallup Fairgrounds and said her entire extended family lived in one stall while they were building the internment camps until their family got moved. So Nobi always could do me one better. So love your stories, both of you.
Thank you, Ramona. Thank you, Tomiko. Erin, you are our final storyteller today, and you've got a great picture. Oh, that's so sweet. And Erin, you're a conductor, a soprano, a voice teacher. You work with corporations as a voice specialist. You're an author and public speaker. And you've participated around the world in international events, bringing together cultures through music, taking on incredible divisions between cultures as well with the power of music. But many people may recognize Erin Gwinnett as the founding executive and artistic director of the Tacoma Refugee Choir. The choir has performed around the region. You've been at political and cultural events. You've been covered on the TV and newspapers, and you even participated in TEDx Seattle with the choir and talked about the power of music to bring people together. All of this is so much a part of your life. Music is so deeply part of what you do. How did you first get started with music?
Well, I have always loved it. My mom always sang in choirs, and we would sing together at church and as a family at holidays. But it might surprise you that I actually wasn't that good at it. I could sing in tune, but I didn't have a very memorable voice, and I wasn't really selected for solos, but I did love to sing. And when I was 12 years old, I was super socially awkward. I just really could not figure it out. And as a result, I was bullied pretty heavily. The choir room was quite literally one of the only places I felt safe at school. It was a place where I felt accepted and where I felt like I wasn't this total dork who couldn't figure out how to make a friend. So as we sang together in choir, I felt like I gained confidence and I learned how to belong. And I continued singing into high school, and by my senior year, I decided I wanted to be a music teacher, just like the people who had touched my lives. But senior year is awfully late to start getting serious about studying music. I started taking voice lessons. I had a job, and so I paid for my own voice lessons because my family just didn't have the means to pay for that. And I found a piano teacher who would let me mop her floors in exchange for piano lessons. My dad pulled me aside one day and he said, "Erin, I know you love music, but you're also very smart." And he said, "You should go to medical school. you could heal people, and you could really make a difference. Can you do that with music? I loved my dad, and I really thought about that question. It really impacted me. So I thought about going to medical school, and I thought about doing lots of other things, but ultimately music kept calling me. And besides, what I really wanted was to be a mom. I wanted to have at least 5 kids, maybe 7, and I really just wanted to be family focused and have that. So why would I spend 10 years in school and thousands in student loans to give it up to raise a family? I was fortunate to move from California up to the University of Puget Sound here in Tacoma, yay. And when I was in college, I found my voice. I learned how to work hard and that I could develop this latent strength into something that was really impactful. And so I started making plans. I was going to go to Vienna and pursue this career in opera performance, and it seemed like I might actually be able to make it. I got a lot of encouragement. And then I met Ken and fell head over heels in love with this man. It was like an MGM movie. I'm serious. Like, I kissed him and I melted down the door. I was like, oh. I was just so in love with him, and he and I wanted the same things in life. We wanted a large family. We really wanted a life founded in faith and love and learning and service and music. And we would dream up all these plans about how we were going to really make a difference together. And so after college, we decided to start our family. And as we approached the turn of the century, we had 2 kids, and life seemed to be, clicking along fairly much according to plan. Now, 6 months after our daughter was born, Ken started to complain about a pain in his shoulder. A few months later, he was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis at age 30. And I thought arthritis was something you take a couple of Tylenol and, you go on with life. But he had a rather aggressive form, and it was completely debilitating for him. The pain was completely overwhelming for him. And pain changes people. I came to our room one day to ask him to come to dinner, and he had a gun in his mouth. A couple of weeks later, I come home with my kids and find a note on the door to go to the hospital. And when I arrived, the doctors were pumping his stomach after swallowing a whole bottle of Tylenol, and they weren't sure if they had gotten to him in time. But he lived. And he promised never to attempt his life again. But the pain was still there, and it was still overwhelming for him. We got a brief moment of relief. They started him on this medication, and it looked like, okay, now things are going to get better. But then things got much worse. He developed a complication out of that called chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyradicular neuropathy, which is as complex as that name. Within 2 weeks, he went from walking to being completely immobilized and being confined in an electric wheelchair. And then it started attacking his vital organs, and his lung function was down to 30%. After 2 years of aggressive chemo and other intense treatments, the doctors didn't know what else to do. And Ken said, "I'm done fighting." And we took him home, and they gave him about a year to live. Here I was, 27 years old. I had 2 small children, a husband who needed care, no family nearby, no job, and all I had was a music degree. What was I supposed to do with a music degree in this situation? People would send well-meaning condolences, but they really didn't know what to say. What do you say? Your life is falling apart. Good luck. And I felt really isolated and alone. I started teaching voice lessons from home because it gave me the flexibility of being able to care for my kids and check in with my husband. And it really gave me a real sense of satisfaction to be able to do something productive. I would teach a bunch of students, and then I'd pray with my family and tuck my kids in at night and sing them lullabies. And then I would go upstairs to my piano, and I would sing songs about death, as if to stare death in the face and say that I could survive this trial. I could survive being a young widow. 5 years later, he was still alive. So we decided to go back to the doctor and see if they could do anything to make his life any more bearable. And they said there was a new medication that had been approved and that we should try it. Of course, it was very expensive, $4,000 a month. I was making half that at that point, and we had to get Congressman Norm Dix involved to help us get it approved by the insurance. While we're waiting for this approval process, I had agreed to direct an opera called Amal and the Night Visitors. And it's a Christmas opera involving that stars a young crippled boy who gives his crutch to the Christ child, and then he is healed. And in a case of art imitating life or life imitating art, during that production, my husband received that medication, and he lifted his arms again for the first time in 5 years. And then he took his first steps. And this was completely life-changing for us, because now I didn't have to care for him, and we could start making plans again. We were like, okay, life is going to be all good now. And of course, his health still had a lot of complications. It was not a complete cure, but it did restore his mobility, and that changed a lot of things for us. So we started making plans, and part of that was to expand our family again. I still longed for those children that I wanted in our home. And we couldn't have any more children by birth because of the chemo. And so we decided we would do foster adopt. And we were going through the process, and I had my heart set on this 10-year-old Mexican boy that was just, it's like, that's who we want to bring to our home. And then the social worker in the last interview expressed concerns about my husband's continuing health instability. And as I protested and said, we just have so much love to give, he said, maybe you should divorce your husband if you want to adopt so badly. I wasn't going to divorce my husband, and I was completely devastated. I wasn't going to have any more children. And honestly, I didn't know how it was going to go on. In the previous 3 years, I conducted this Easter oratorio at church called Lamb of God. It features an 80-voice choir and orchestra, and I really love this piece. But I told the leaders at church, I can't do it this year. I didn't know how to make music when my heart was so broken. But they somehow convinced me to do it. They just wouldn't let me out of it. And so I did it. And I'm so glad I did, because in the process of doing that production, my faith was restored, and more healing of that broken heart came than I could have possibly imagined. And after that production, a woman came up to me, and she had expressed how much she was moved by the production. And then she says, oh, so this is your baby now, right? This is your baby. Those words pierced my heart. And in that moment, I knew that things were going to be okay, that this gift of music that I'd been given was the place where I was supposed to put all the love that I had to give. I knew that music could make an impact on other people like it had made for me when I was 12 years old and helped me feel safe. And I knew that music could help people to gain a sense of belonging like I did as a teenager, and that music could help people to find their voice and figure out how to make a difference like it did when I was a college student. And like when I was a young adult, to dream about possibilities and to do all sorts of, to free myself from what could happen and believe that things could happen. And like when death hung over our family like a cloud, I knew that music could bring comfort. And like when my heart was broken, I knew that music could help restore faith and to help us find the courage to press on when it seems impossible to do so. I feel so fortunate because I've seen this impact over and over again with students and with choirs that I've worked with. And even my husband, who lost his ability to sing from the chemo and the ability to play his instruments from the arthritis, he's found the music kept calling him, and he's recently taken up drumming. Cool. The neuroscience of singing is just starting to figure out how music affects us. But what we do know is that music affects our biochemistry. It changes, our body releases a host of neurochemicals like dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin when we sing. And I realized recently that isn't that what medicine does? Change our biochemistry to help our bodies heal? Isn't it that what music does? And in a time when there's so many people in the world hurting and lonely and scared and hopeless, it seems to me that music and its power to heal and connect people is perhaps needed now more than any other time. A couple of years ago, I was really moved by the refugee crisis, and I didn't feel like I could do anything about what was happening in Europe or in other countries. But I did realize that I wasn't powerless to help people and refugees that are resettled in our community feel safe and welcomed. And so we started the choir, and it's been a really rewarding experience. It's also been excruciatingly difficult. When I started, I didn't have the tools I needed to build this. I'd never done fundraising. I didn't know anything about board governance or grant writing, and I didn't even know any refugees at that point. And I didn't know people who could help us to make this happen. And it's been scary. I've gotten super emotional about this year because it's hard. The first time one of our refugees said that the choir was like their family and that I was like a mother to them, I knew it was worth pushing through those points where it feels like you're not sure how it's going to work out. In our first few years, we've been able to reach over 300 people at a rehearsal and have people from 37 countries at a rehearsal. It's been remarkable. So many of them have become like family to me. And when we rehearse on Tuesdays, it doesn't matter what kind of day we've had. Like, people will come in trudging in like, oh, this was my week, and barely coming in, but by the end, we're all so joyful and happy. It's because music heals us, and it helps us to feel strong again, and it binds us together. Through the choir, we've had the opportunity to mourn with people who are unable to be reunited with their families, or unable to return to their home country for a mother's funeral. We've been able to lift one another, and we've been able to connect with people to, study for a test or write a paper, and also affirm that we will be a friend while they wait their deportation hearing. Most of all, it's just made us happy, and especially in light of all the negativity, it's helped me to see the world as not something that I'm powerless against, but that I have the power to live my life. No legislation, no politics, no rhetoric. It can change the way that I treat other people. I am in charge of that. And that as we sing together, we can come together and make each other stronger. Now, I'm not delusional in thinking that music can save the world, but this I know. Music changes people, and people change the world. So really, music can perhaps be the thing that we need at this time. And the great thing is that singing doesn't cost anything. Anybody can do it. And I mean anybody can do it. And perhaps that's the thing that we need to heal our hearts and our community.
Thank you, Erin. So now that you've talked and we've seen and heard so much about the power of music, do we get to sing a little bit?
Yeah, I think that'd be fabulous.
Great.
So we have a song today that some of our members of our refugee choir wrote. That one of our members was saying, we need something happier. And so I brought 3 members of the choir, 3 refugees, over to my house one afternoon, and we wrote this song. And Trésor John, he's a refugee from the Democratic Republic of Congo, incredibly talented musician, and he's a star just waiting to be discovered. He's just really brilliant. But he usually sings the solos on this, so if you've heard the refugee choir, he's usually the one. It was written for his voice. But I'm going to sing it today. When we get to the chorus, I would love for you to join us. It's a pretty straightforward message. And the chorus is that everyone can love someone and everyone needs love. It doesn't matter where you're from. We all need love. And the pre-chorus, which I didn't put up, but you're welcome to join in if you'd like, but it's Natalie Bajinha, she's one of our refugee members. This was her part. Sad stories can be rewritten. And as I was practicing this before today, I was thinking, gosh, that's so appropriate to tell at a storytelling festival, that no matter where we come from, no matter what kind of past we've been through, that we can be triumphant in that, and that we can still make a difference. No matter what our circumstances, we can make a difference. So I think we'll take it away. I'll sing the solos today and then join in when we get to the chorus. Yesterday is gone, a brighter day is here. Have somebody, sad stories can be rewritten, where fear ends and hope begins. Everyone can love someone, and everyone needs love. Everyone can love someone. We need each other. Everyone can love someone. And everyone needs love. It doesn't matter where you're from. We all need love. When people change, the world is changed. We can make a difference when we give and love. 'Cause I've been loved and love changed my story. Sad stories can be rewritten, where fear ends and love begins. Everyone can love someone, and everyone needs love. Everyone can love someone. We need each other. Everyone can love someone, and everyone needs love. It doesn't matter where you're from. We all need love. Here's the bridge. Love is pure, love is kind, love protects, love is blind. Love is pure, love is kind, love protects, love is blind. Love is pure, love is kind, love protects, love is blind. Love is pure, love is kind. I love it. Give someone a hug next to you.
Erin, thank you so much. And Erin, when we had talked about the power of love, we talked about when we sing in harmony, our brains are in harmony. That singing really does create harmony and community. And as we draw to the close of our 5th annual Willow Storytelling Festival, I want to thank again Song Shen, the reason we're here today. It was her vision to celebrate the voices of women and girls and share life lessons across generations.
And I want to say the reason I'm here is because Rosa Franklin asked me. And of all the things that people have asked her to do, that's the first time Rosa Franklin ever asked me to do anything.
Thank you, Rosa. And finally, I want to offer, on behalf of Willow, the deepest gratitude for each of you, Rosa, Bev, Tomiko, Erin, for coming in and sharing your story and having us have the opportunity to share in your wisdom and your learning. We have a flower for you. And we want to thank you with these flowers for letting us step inside of your lives today. Thank you so much. Thank you as well for the time and for your hearts and for your attention. And I hope that as you've been listening, you have also found memories from your own life stirring up, places where you thought, God, I remember that. I wonder if those experiences for me are also part of the story, and they are. The stories that you know, the experiences, the wisdom that bubbles up for you now and as you go home, that's your story to share. And when we share our stories, we build a stronger community. It's an act of generosity. Thank you, guys. Thanks so much.